¿qué tal? I'm Vicky Diaz-Camacho, your co-host, and welcome to episode 6 of Diálogos. We have a very special guest host today.
Thank you, Vicky. Hola, I'm Melanie Silva, and I'm excited to be co-hosting this show with you.
Yes, so let's get started with what's on our radar.
Let's go.
Well, Philly was just graded an F by the American Lung Association in its 2025 State of the Air report. Air pollution is getting worse in the city, the report states. And last year, just for context, Philly was awarded a C. So we're seeing worsening air quality determined by, quote, the number of days with high ozone and particle pollution. I mean, that sucks because 2 years ago I moved here, so it was probably around a C, and me and my husband both have asthma. So we just got to see how that's going to impact us, how to prepare, how to take care of each other.
And I totally believe it. I've noticed the past maybe 3 years that the amount of traffic has increased in Philadelphia, and I'm sure that that's contributing to the air quality.
But now, Melanie, you're not only our special guest host, but you're also a filmmaker, and I'd love to learn more about your documentary called Dear Sophia.
It's my first feature film documentary, probably my first and only. I don't know. It's a lot of work. This has been a process of years. We started filming during the pandemic and now just had a rough cut last year. So, but it's about my journey. In fact, I'm going to read my log line because my fantastic executive producer wrote a really beautiful log line for me. So, when her autistic daughter has to enter the outside world, a mother has to face her own fears. Poetically narrated by a mom and intimately filmed by a dad, Dear Sophia openly exposes the hurts and joys of parenthood and the difficult journey of letting go.
Wow.
And so this is my journey with my daughter. And it was up and down, and parenthood really, changed for me once she was diagnosed. And once I educated myself more on autism, everything opened up. I learned that I'm neurodivergent. So it was also, I touch a little bit on that process, that I learned finally that, all these things, like there's a reason. And I think that it helped me connect with Sophia more. So I'm really excited. This year, it is my mission to finish this film.
Okay.
And it's almost there. And I'm just really excited to share this with people and hope that parents and caretakers and therapists will not approach autism in a different way and not as this is terrible, this is the worst thing that could happen to you, and just be more open-minded about it.
Well, we're all looking forward to watching it, and good luck as you finish this film.
Thank you. Yeah.
On another note, you're also part of Stand Up for Philly Schools, which is fairly new, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what do we need to know about what this group does and your involvement?
Okay, so Stand Up for Philly Schools is a coalition of Philadelphians who are committed to public schools, and we're working together to raise public awareness and enhance community engagement in the facilities planning process, okay? Has to do with the buildings and what, So we have certain needs, like we need more time. There's just this whole process seems really rushed. We don't have time to really meaningfully engage with the public before they make a decision at the end of this year. We need more options instead of the options that they gave us, and one of those options is closing, and we're adamantly against closing any schools. And basically, this group is important because our school buildings are crumbling, and our students need, not only need, but they have the right to go into a healthy and safe space when they go to school.
Yeah, Absolutely.
So that's where we've come in, and we have more demands, and you can catch us on our social media. We just opened up an Instagram at Stand Up for Philly Schools on Instagram for now.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll just keep everyone posted on how this evolves,
Yes.
what to expect in the coming year.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Up next, a conversation about community-based healthcare and what solutions our two experts have.
I'm excited.
Since my reporting days in Kansas City, maternal health care issues and the solutions have been extremely important to me. I co-produced a 3-part series investigating how maternity care racially evolved and which practitioners were often left out. Some really fun facts that I'd like to share so that we can frame this conversation we're about to have. I found out that Indigenous communities and immigrant families have long had midwives at the core of their maternal health care. But as the obstetrics field formalized and evolved, all the research on birth outcomes and risks basically said that midwives were the problem. But it was skewed because this was rooted in eugenics, which really was saying, let's keep the white population white and everyone else out. So an important fact I'd love to share with you, Melanie, is that the practice of midwifery was essential for the birth outcomes for babies and the mothers. In 1915, 40% of all births were attended by midwives. But by 1935, that number decreased to 10.7%, of whom 54% were non-white. And when they did a study to see whether or not they were actually helping the community, they found that midwifery's involvement actually had a huge effect on curbing infant deaths and premature births.
I believe it.
Yeah. So all of these facts, I think we have to remember. There's a history here, and I would love to hear about the present day effects of maternal health care and your experiences.
Well, this is actually one of my favorite topics in the world. When I got pregnant for the first time, my knowledge about birthing and all was completely limited. But I lived in Mexico City at the time, and the cesarean rate was extremely high. At that time, it was 70 to 80%. And when you think 70 to 80% of Mexican women can't have a natural childbirth. So that led me to a birth education class, and it was something that revolutionized everything for me. It was a 15-week course, and I went into my first birth, and it was a hospital birth. I had a doula, and I gave birth in a tub in water, and I just went in without any fear. And I knew that, what was going to happen. And I think that that was essential because it was a way that I could advocate for myself. And having the doula there who, for my first birth, just snapped her fingers and told doctors what to do. No, she wants to go down, and I just focused on giving birth.
Wow.
Was a game changer.
So I'm excited for this conversation to see where it goes and what we learn.
Yeah.
Joining us today are two experts who have played a role in improving outcomes for Black and Latina parents. Carmen Alvarez is an associate professor in the nursing school at the University of Pennsylvania. Carmen pioneered Cuidándome, a virtual program for immigrant Latina adverse childhood experience survivors, which has seen success in helping reduce depression and anxiety symptoms. She is also a registered nurse with a focus on community-centered care, trauma, and comprehensive healing. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And our other guest is Camila Carolina, a birth worker in Philadelphia and founder of do Centro da Mãe Terra Indigenous Healing Arts Center. She comes from a long lineage of midwives and focuses her efforts on indigenous-based methods and practices. Thank you for being here, Camila.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here.
Okay, great. There's going to be a slight delay, so FYI, we're good. All right, so we'd love to start the conversation with each of your personal stories and what drew you both to the work in maternal health care. So let's start with you, Carmen.
Thank you. You know, I have always been drawn to helping people be their best. And of course, we know that, you need to be mentally and physically well in order to be your optimal self. And so that's the belief that drew me to wanting to be involved in some form of healthcare. And I actually started with um, food. So, how food influences your health and well being. I got a degree in nutritional science, and that's what sparked my interest in maternal and child health. And I decided to become a family nurse practitioner and midwife, and have been loving it ever since.
Beautiful. Thank you.
I would say that for me, it started when I was a little girl, just following on my grandmother's footsteps, on my mom's. Pretty much all of my relatives have taken on to a specific type of role of traditional caregivers. And I was born in the Atlantic forest and being in touch with nature and with these ways, these cultural and traditional practices of healing really impacted the choices I made later on in my life to choose the path that I'm on. And so, definitely in 2019, when I got pregnant of my first daughter, it was when I was able to fully embody some of these practices and shift them and shift my attention, my care in my community to birth work.
Amazing. And it sounds like you both have this focus on community centered care and the power of that and how that can improve outcomes for parenting people, right? So, Carmen, you have primarily focused on immigrant Latina women. What unique needs do they have, and what have you learned throughout, your research?
That people who have experienced um, lots of adversity, different types of adversity, in childhood and also in adulthood are at increased risk for experiencing mental health challenges, particularly depression and anxiety. And for a lot of Latina immigrant women, um, greater length of stay in the United States is associated with poor mental health. And then you have lack of access to mental health support. So the two combined, you have people who are with the history of adversity, less access to care, you've got increased risk for remaining in poor mental health. And so Cuidándome is intended to address that gap, where, as you mentioned already, it's something that's delivered virtually. So people can access it from their homes. It's a synchronous program delivered by a trained facilitator. They meet weekly for 10 weeks. And it was a program that was developed with and by Latinas, so it's culturally appropriate.
Yeah.
And we were excited and impressed to identify or to see the reduction in depression and anxiety in women, not just immediately after the program, but that reduction was maintained until
Wow.
about 6 months afterwards.
That's powerful.
Yeah. I had a follow-up question. When you talk about adverse childhood experiences, can you give us a little bit of context of give us some examples of what that can mean?
Sure. So the term refers to different types of adversity that occur under the age of 18. And so they can be physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, physical and emotional neglect, and then a group of experiences categorized under household dysfunction, if you will. So living with an adult with mental illness, living with an adult that struggles with substance misuse, having an incarcerated relative, witnessing domestic violence, um, and having divorced parents. And then there's some other experiences that we've learned are also can be detrimental to your mental health. And that includes community violence. So witnessing community violence or experiencing collective violence, so violence perpetrated by an organized group, whether it's the police, military, homeland security, all of those aggressions that occur at a young age can be considered an adverse childhood experience. As bullying is another one as well.
And Camila, I'd love to get your perspective on what we just heard right now and kind of how you have mitigated or supported community members through similar circumstances.
So through the work that we do with the Centro de Terra, there's many different offerings, and of course, at the center are always Black, Indigenous, people of color, people from the LGBTQ plus community, and especially people who face severe hardship, financial hardship, or inability to find holistic healing. Um, and seeing our community, what our community looks like here in Southwest Philadelphia, which is where I live and predominantly where I give these offerings. We have a wide variety of people that come from different cultures, and most of the time are have been extracted, right, have been separated from their traditional homelands, or have little to no understanding of what their cultural and traditional practices are. And so I want to emphasize that traditional healing saves lives. And the reason why my family has continuously kept these traditions and these practices is because there was a time in, after colonization in Brazil, that my relatives had little to no option, right, to help. My midwife, my grandmother was a midwife who delivered babies with no assistance, and sometimes, given that generation was the first generation of the second generation of first contact in their region, they also had to start this work very, very young. So my grandmother started her work, being 15 years old. And so looking at the reality here in this community, one of the things that we face is the high mortality rate, especially of Black, brown women, right, during pregnancy, birth, or postpartum. And the types of care that we receive in Western, the medical industrial complex, it really doesn't give us all that we need to heal during this time. So, given that birth is the time that we're the most open, the most vulnerable we'll ever be, the postpartum time is for nourishment, for warmth, for healing in all the aspects, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. And what traditional healing does, it brings us back to self, tending to the birthing person, tending to the baby, tending to the whole family in ways that we can really not just, there's not that mentality of the bounce back, right? There's just a way of closing ourselves and giving back life, and many of these imbalances that we see, or these diseases, they come from this lack of care during this postpartum time. And I emphasize the immediate postpartum, especially we call it the cuarentena. So those are the first 40 days. And we have knowledge from our elders that the first 40 days of somebody's life impacts the first 40 years. And then of course we can talk about the first 3 months and childhood, right, in aspects of like 7 years. But the first 40 days are very, very important. And so traditional healing really heals the root cause of these imbalances by bringing us back to balance, as a whole. And instead of separating our mental health from our physical health, from our spiritual health.
What I absolutely love about what both of you bring to the table today is this focus on social determinants of health, if we're talking about it from, the public health perspective, but, how our experiences growing up affect us, how our environments also will impact us, how our home life affects us, the migration story, how that can also affect us. So when we're thinking about those unique niche needs, can you kind of expound more, both of you, on what is needed here in Philadelphia to further support Black and Brown birthing folks and people who have had children?
Who's going? I can go first.
Go ahead. I was waiting.
I think something that has been shared by my colleague is the importance of social support. There is a lot of social isolation that comes with the immigration experience. Most of us culturally live in multi generational households, have a different culture and way of engaging with people in our immediate community. And oftentimes that tends to go away with the immigration experience, and that you've left behind those that have offered that social support, and then the work life that people have to have in order to survive can further make that social isolation even worse. And so I think that was one of the highlights of Cuidándome, is that even though it was virtual, it did bring people together. And when people express challenges like, I'm unemployed or I'm looking for work, people put in the chat, here's my number, call me, we're hiring at my location. So we know that building people's social network, social capital, helps a lot with managing stressors and having resources, people like doulas, community health workers, who come and offer support, especially in the postpartum period. We know that that also decreases the stress for the mother and the birthing person and the family.
Thank you. Camila.
Absolutely, I definitely second that. And one of the from personal experience, I realized that my second pregnancy, my second pregnancy, I was able to plan. And so there's something very important in planning, because traditional healing is also to avoid, to prevent, right, certain conditions. So if we bring that awareness to the now, this only was able to happen because there was planning. Just like there's planning for planting, there's planning for fertility, there's planning for the birth and postpartum time. So I always tell families, the birth is a very magical time. It is a sacred ceremony, but we should be spending much more time focusing on planning the postpartum time, in reaching out for community, reaching out for family, if we have family here, for that support, and also chosen family. So in my experience, what I had to do was to plan during my second pregnancy, to plan the whole entire postpartum time with the people who were going to be here. And that also gives people opportunity to be able to help, because we all live in the same situation sometimes, right? Like my colleague is saying, with lack of support, lack of family here to really be able to give us this support. One of the ways that I support families in the traditional sense as well is coming to the homes. So the work of a doula is very important to support postpartum in any way, right? In any way, shape, or form that we can give our services. And with the traditional healing, I come to people's homes once a week for the first 6 weeks, but also giving them not just the care that they might need, like laundry or cleaning or cooking, but the baths, the plant bathing, massages, and then closing of the body ceremonies, so they can really feel strong, intended to. And so also any of us can offer these practices to each other. We don't have to, and I always say, you don't have to be licensed massage therapist to touch somebody with love and care, to give a birthing person, postpartum person, just a gentle, soothing touch. So these are also practices that we can see happening within our family dynamics and within our communities, in ways that sometimes we think, oh, only a provider is able to give me this type of healing, and that is not true. And so some of the educational opportunities that we provide with the Centro da Mãe Terra is teaching community members how to actually apply these practices to family members, to other community members, in order to expand the knowledge that we have, because we all come from different cultures. and we all come from different places. But these innermost natural ways of taking care of each other, we share these similarities in our culture. So it's important that we collectively awake, right? Awaken this knowledge inside of us. And what my teachers always say, this brings us back to our self autonomy in healing. And it also brings our sovereignty back. So we don't depend on any systems to actually provide us healing, because this is the people's healing. It has always been our types of taking care of each other, right?
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thinking about my postpartum and both what you said and what Mila's saying, community and helping. After I had both my children, my mother came I was living in Mexico and my mother came for a month. Super important for my postpartum period. And then when I had my son, my sister-in-law came for 3 months.
Wow.
Not a lot of people have that. But then also what you mentioned about, being together and, my job is, it's community,
Truly.
village.
Yes.
So we know that there remains a persistent lack of birthing and healthcare workers of color. So what can we do to address that need to diversify the workforce?
I think it's making ourselves more visible, and especially at an earlier time. In terms of education, so exposing ourselves to first elementary people in elementary school, exposing ourselves to people in trade programs, for example, letting people know our story and letting them know the opportunity that exists. So, when I worked in community health centers, I'm always talking to the medical assistants about going for a degree in nursing and talking about all the ways in which they can do that much more for their community and also for their family. So I think it's being more visible so that people know that it's an option, and that if we can do it, they can do it too.
But I come from an intact lineage of caregivers, of traditional caregivers. But teaching your children and teaching your children, I truly trust that if every child was in the presence of birth, home birth, hospital birth, whatever, right? But in most cases, children are not even allowed in the hospital, right? But I definitely go back to teaching the children, so we need to, in terms of traditional work, when we work, we look at the 7 generations ahead of us and the 7 generations behind us. So everything we learned before us, that our ancestors are here to teach us one way or another, but also we need to be paving the road for our children. So otherwise, these practices will not last. So it isn't also just about the now, but it's about the future and what ways our communities will absolutely need to be tended to. Because there's so many different things shifting in our reality worldwide right now, that if we don't really hold on to our traditional practices and the work of birth workers and midwives and nurses, caregivers, we'll start seeing a much bigger impact on our health. Also, food, of course, right? But I believe that we can do this work together.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much, each of you, for being here and sharing your heart and your work. Please continue doing what you do.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you so much for joining us today. Catch up on our latest at intimedia.org, or find more Diálogos episodes on Spotify and YouTube.
And if you've enjoyed our last few episodes, reshare, comment, and tag us on social at News by Inti Media. Gracias.
Nos vemos.